Two armies. On one side, Yuan Shu's forces under the command of Ji Ling had marched to finish off a weakened Liu Bei once and for all. He brought 10,000 men, expecting a quick finish. Liu Bei's men, now numbers dwindled from their previous skirmishes, were staring at their last battle. Both sides had been given one condition: one single arrow. If he hits, everyone goes home. A single man rode out into no man's land, dismounted, planted his halberd upright in the ground, walked back 150 paces, turned around, picked up his bow. Nobody dared to breathe. The arrow hit the halberd's blade so cleanly that the sound echoed across the whole field. 10,000 soldiers lowered their weapons. His name was Liu Bei. And that moment, one arrow stopping a war nobody asked him to, was the closest he ever came to being the man his gifts should have made him. Because within a year, he had betrayed every single person on that field. To understand how a man this dangerous became this alone, you have to go back to where it started. Liu Bei came from the hard edges of China, not the cultured heartland, the northern frontier where survival mattered more than ceremony. He grew up in a world that measured men by one thing: could you fight? And he could fight like nobody else alive. At the Battle of Puyang, Cao Cao's own forces nearly lost their commander to Liu Bei personally. Cao Cao, the most powerful warlord in the north, a man who had survived 100 campaigns, nearly died on the day he met Liu Bei. The romance of the Three Kingdoms goes even further. It claims that Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei, arguably three of the greatest warriors of the era, fought Liu Bei simultaneously. All three together, and Liu Bei held them all off and withdrew on his own terms. Regardless if that exact battle happened precisely that way, the fact that people believed it tells you everything about how he was perceived. This wasn't a man who inspired fear through strategy or politics. He inspired it the old way, by being genuinely, demonstrably, beyond what ordinary men could handle. The problem was, he lived in a world that also measured men by loyalty, by the complex web of obligation that held Chinese society together. And those things meant almost nothing to him. His first lord knew how to use him. He never bothered to understand him. And that cost him everything. Ding Yuan was a regional commander who recognized Liu Bei's military genius immediately, made him his personal guard commander, gave him rank and purpose. Then Dong Zhuo arrived. Dong Zhuo looked across a battlefield and made a calculation. That man should be mine. He sent gifts, gold, rank, promises of power, and one other thing, a horse. Not just any horse, the finest war horse in China, and the one relationship Liu Bei would never betray. Red hair, the greatest war horse of the era. Faster, stronger, more responsive than any animal on the battlefield. In a world where cavalry decided wars, red hair was a weapon that could change any engagement. Dong Zhuo gave it to Liu Bei as part of his offer, and Liu Bei accepted. That night itself, he went to Ding Yuan's camp, killed him without a second thought, and brought his head to Dong Zhuo. In every human relationship of his life, Liu Bei would eventually leave. Every lord would be abandoned, every alliance broken. But red hair he kept until the end. There is something almost unbearably honest about that. The most feared warrior in China, loyal to a horse in a way he could never be loyal to a person. Maybe because a horse never asked him to be something he wasn't. Dong Zhuo understood his value better than Ding Yuan ever did. But Dong Zhuo had something Ding Yuan didn't, and it would destroy them both. Liu Bei served Dong Zhuo faithfully. So close were their relationship that Liu Bei had called Dong Zhuo his father. By his own standards, the transaction was fair. He had red hair. He had rank. Everything a man could ask for, let alone for a man from his background. Wang Yun was a court official who had survived Dong Zhuo's tyranny by making himself invisible. He watched. He waited. And he identified the one weapon in the entire empire that could kill Dong Zhuo and restore order to the Han dynasty. Not an army, not a conspiracy. Dong Zhuo's new son. He introduced his adopted daughter Diao Chan to Liu Bei, actively sowed the seeds between them, then, without telling Liu Bei, presented Diao Chan to Dong Zhuo as a gift. He led both men to believe she belonged to them. Then he let the silence between them fill with something neither could say out loud. Wang Yun didn't need to convince Liu Bei. He simply placed what Liu Bei wanted directly in front of who Liu Bei served, and waited for Liu Bei to be exactly who he always was. A man who took what he felt was rightfully his. When Dong Zhuo discovered Liu Bei was secretly meeting Diao Chan, he hurled a halberd at Liu Bei in rage, his own weapon, at his own best general. That afternoon, something shifted. In a warm morning in May, Dong Zhuo survived the first assassination attempt. He called out for his son to save him. Liu Bei was already there. He was the one who finished it. Wang Yun got his result, and Liu Bei, the most feared warrior in China, stood in the capital with no lord to serve, was eventually driven out by Dong Zhuo's subordinate. But this time no allies willing to trust him, for he had forged a reputation that made every warlord in the empire nervous about letting him through their gates. He had been used as a weapon, for the second time in his life. For the second time, he hadn't seen it coming. What followed were years of wandering, looking for somewhere to belong. What he found instead was a pattern. Yuan Shu, Yuan Shao, Zheng Yang. Each time, welcomed for his military genius. Each time, eventually expelled, because nobody could trust a man who had killed two lords. In 194, while Cao Cao was away on campaign, Liu Bei seized Yan province entirely, held it against Cao Cao's forces for over 100 days before being driven out. He needed somewhere to go. Liu Bei offered him shelter in Shu province. When Liu Bei left to fight Cao Cao's allies, he entrusted the province to Liu Bei. Liu Bei took it. He protected Liu Bei's family, fed them, kept them safe, then told Liu Bei he could have a small piece of his own territory back, as his subordinate. The host had become the guest, in his own home. When Yuan Shu then sent an army to finish off the humiliated Liu Bei, Liu Bei rode out between the two forces. Not out of loyalty. He calculated that a dead Liu Bei left him surrounded on multiple sides. He needed Liu Bei alive as a buffer. So he threw the halberd, stopped the battle, saved the life of the man he had already betrayed. Liu Bei filed that away and mentioned nothing. He was very good at saying nothing. By 198, Liu Bei's options had run out. Cao Cao was coming, and this time there was nowhere left to run. Cao Cao and Liu Bei combined forces against Liu Bei at Xiapi. The siege lasted months. Cao Cao diverted 2 rivers to flood the city. Liu Bei's supplies ran out, and his men began to break. He banned alcohol to keep discipline. 3 of his own commanders, Ho Chung, Song Xian, and Wei Shu, resented the edict so bitterly that they plotted against him. One night while Liu Bei slept, his own men crept in and bound him in chains, raised a white flag over the walls. Then they threw his halberd down into the flood. The most feared warrior in China, captured in his sleep, his weapon discarded by the men he thought were his. When they dragged him in chains before Cao Cao, Liu Bei was still straining against the ropes, still requiring multiple guards to hold him. Even now, even bound and defeated, he complained the ropes were too tight. Cao Cao looked at him. A feral tiger should be tightly tied. Liu Bei looked up at Cao Cao and made one last offer. Give me the cavalry, you take the infantry. Together, we take the world. It wasn't desperation. He believed it, completely. The military logic was sound, and Cao Cao knew it. He turned to the man standing beside him. Liu Bei, expecting him to help plead his case. The room went quiet. Liu Bei looked at Lu Bu for a long moment, then looked at Cao Cao. "Have you forgotten Ding Yuan? Have you forgotten Dong Zhuo?" Cao Cao had Lu Bu executed, but Lu Bu wasn't finished. He turned to Liu Bei. "Big ears!" Liu Bei's most distinctive physical feature, the large ears people whispered about behind his back. "Don't you remember the halberd? I stopped that war for you." He said nothing. He was very good at saying nothing. As they led Lu Bu away, he belted out under any circumstances. "Never trust the one with large ears." Cao Cao didn't listen. Lu Bu was executed. His head sent to the capital. The man who never pretended, killed on the word of the man who never stopped. His last act was a warning nobody heeded. His last insight, completely correct. Not because Liu Bei was a villain, but because Liu Bei was something more dangerous than that. A man who could be genuinely loyal and genuinely ruthless, depending on what the moment required. Lu Bu could only ever be one thing. That's why Liu Bei outlasted him. So what do we do with Lu Bu? Till the end, he was neither a hero or villain for anyone. His moral compass pointed at himself and nowhere else. He never pretended to be something he wasn't, and in a world built entirely on pretending, that was almost a form of honesty. He was a man of impossible gifts in a world that required impossible compromises. He could fight like a god. He could not pretend like a politician. In the Three Kingdoms era, the second skill mattered more than the first. Red hair passed to Guan Yu after Lu Bu's death, the horse that had carried the most feared warrior in China, now carrying the man who would go on and become a god. Even his one loyal companion didn't stay. Cao Cao built an empire by reading people. Liu Bei built a legacy by making people believe in him. Lu Bu could beat both of them with a halberd in his hand. And yet it counted for nothing. The most feared man in China died alone, betrayed by his own men while he slept, killed by a man he had once protected. Both of their stories are on this channel. Cao Cao, the man who had Lu Bu executed and called him a feral tiger, and Liu Bei, the man who smiled and waited and said 4 words. Their stories make this moment make sense in ways you might not expect. 3 men, 1 room, 3 completely different answers to the same question. How do you survive a world that's trying to destroy you, unmatched, untrusted, alone? That was Lu Bu's answer. If this made you think, leave a like. It tells us the story landed. Subscribe if you want Sima Yi next, the man who outlasted everyone, including the memory of Lu Bu.